Hey guys, welcome to another video on the grammar tutorial, and today we're going to be dealing with clauses. Clauses are sentences that are put together to form an idea, okay? And how you express that idea in terms of different things like time, place, contrast, all those are ways of pretty much communicating and getting your listener to anticipate what you are going to talk about. So, for example, if you wake up in the morning and somebody says, "How are you?" that is introducing some type of clause. Your answer to "How are you doing?" is going to respond in a clause. You're not going to see something like, "I slept." Okay. Um, you could use, for example, a temporal clause like last night I slept well, or tonight I didn't sleep that well. This, again, introduces or provides a clue to the listener what and how well you're expressing yourself. Clauses are pretty much everywhere, not only in the English language, they exist in all languages, and they're usually always introduced by adverbs. The English language is made up of, and I'm going to use type here for you. So there are 9 clauses which are made up of 2 things. Okay, typically 2 things. So the first is you got your dependent, and your second is the independent clause. Okay, so you will always note, and when we were doing diagramming of Divergent, you saw very clearly that we were dealing with a one sentence, then a comma, and then another sentence, and one of them was dependent on the other, and only one of them could stand alone. So that right away tells you, hey, I'm a clause. A second is an if clause followed by the result. Okay, so you're always either going to get a dependent and independent clause or an if plus a result. Okay, and I'll explain what that means in a few minutes. So let's look at some examples. Your first clause is time or temporal. And temporal simply comes from the Latin word tempus, meaning time. Okay, so this is where you will introduce in your clause things that pretty much refer to whenever something's happening. So you may see things in your sentence like when something happened, or whenever, or before, after, as, while, until, as soon as, or since. Okay, and it's not since in a causal sense like a cause, but since yesterday all I did was slept. Okay, now that introduces a time. So let's give us an example. So after I finish watching this video, I will know more. There should be a comma right here, sorry. I will know more about clauses. Okay, so let's put this to the test, right? We have an introduction. Here's our adverb right there. And that introduces time, right? There's our after. I finish watching this video. This is our dependent clause. It's dependent because it requires the idea to finish, right? If I'm going to say, after I finish watching this video, you are going to be looking at me and going, wait a minute, okay, and what's going to happen after? This is the wonderful thing about clauses, because they prepare you for something. And if it doesn't come, the idea is not finished, and you are stuck with a lot of confusion, typically. So we need to finish this idea, which makes this our dependent clause. And the independent clause is right here. And we're going to make it go green. Right there. And what I'd like you guys to do is keep in mind that commas will always come in the middle between a dependent and independent sentence. But if you reverse this, so if I do, I will know more about the clauses after I finish watching the video, you now do not need a comma because the adverb, this one right here, the adverb after separates both of these dependent and independent sentences. Okay, so I hope this makes some sense for you so far. Okay, so this is an example of a temporal clause. Our next is place, also known as a locative. And again, why do we call it a locative? Latin locus meaning place. And the adverbs associated with place clauses or locative clauses are where, wherever, and everywhere. You can even include somewhere, okay? But we got where, wherever, everywhere. And let's have an example. Where there is a library, there are books. Okay? You can also say everywhere you look, you see books. Okay? And notice that once again, where there is a library, you probably guessed this right, there's our dependent clause. Everywhere you look, again, another dependent clause. And then we have our independent clause, which is there are books and you see books. Okay? And once again, if we reverse the order, we don't need that comma in the middle. All right, moving on. Number 3, we have a condition or conditional sentences. Also known as if clauses. Why? Because they start with if. They can also start with unless and provided that. Pretty much conditionals offer you two things: the condition and the result if that condition is met. And conditional sentences or conditional clauses are broken up into substructures that are a little bit complex, and we may deal with them in our next video. But for now, you just need to know that conditional sentences are always introduced by these adverbs. So if I finish watching this video, comma, I will know more about clauses. Okay? So here is my really awesome and amazing dependent clause, because if I finish watching this video, something else is going to happen, and that is I will know more about clauses. Now, how is this different from a temporal clause, which is just above here? It sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? After I finish, if I finish. The first one, where you see after I finish watching this video, this one is actually telling you that something is happening right now. Versus the condition, first I must meet the condition of finishing watching the video, which not necessarily means I'm doing it now. And then the result of this is going to be that I will know more about classes. Okay, so temporal, conditional, a little bit of a difference there for you. The fourth type is manner. Okay, so manner in which something happens. And usually you see things like, as though, and as if. So we can introduce this book, this clause, for example, by saying something like, I am reading this book as if it was assigned for tomorrow. So you are telling somebody the manner in which you're reading this book. You're reading this book very, very quickly. And notice that as if is separating the I'm reading this book, which is your independent clause, okay, or independent sentence, and your dependent sentence is the one that follows your adverb, which is right here. And again, you could reverse it. You could say, as if it was assigned for tomorrow, I'm reading this book. So you need a comma after tomorrow. At number 5, I don't know why that. So at number 5, we have reason, also known as a causal clause. All right. Latin for reason. Causa equals reason for sake of. Now, you may see examples such as because pop up a lot. You may see since. You may also see as. Okay. And an example here is since I watched Mr. G's video, I know more grammar. There you go. Okay. And once again, we break this up into 2 parts, right? We got our since, and notice the adverb right here, since. That is my dependent clause, and this is my independent clause. Okay. And I can reverse it. I can say, I know more grammar since I watched Mr. G's video, and then you do not need a comma after that. At number 6, following reason, we have effect, also known as the result clause. And here you'll have things introduced as so, and ending with that, or we have such, ... that, okay? And here we have a sentence, Mr. G's grammar videos were so informative that now I know more about grammar. Okay, so notice that I do not need a comma here. Why? Because here are my adverbs, the adverbial question so. So here's my that. Okay, and it separates this idea from that idea. So Mr. G's grammar videos were so informative, okay, that now I know more about grammar, okay? And again, your dependent idea, which is right here, is dependent on this, the result, okay? The result is that I've done something previous to it. So once again, we are separating the 2 sections together. The next one, which is very, very weird in the English language because it looks exactly the same, okay, as a clause we've already met. And this is comparison comparative. And all I got to do is jump up to right here, all right, to the place, and simply copy and paste these adverbs and apply it to my comparative. So now everybody's going, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Why is it exactly the same as the locative or the place clause? Well, number one, there is a difference between when we use where to indicate where something is, as in a place, and say where when we're talking about a comparative idea. So we would say something like this: wherever roses are red, violets are blue. Okay. So again, we see two ideas coming together, introduced by wherever. Notice the comma right here. And I could say violets are blue wherever roses are red. Both ideas are independent here because both violets are blue and roses are red. But what really compares them is this use of wherever. So very close to the locative, but not quite, because in this case, you're comparing or you're contrasting one section to another versus in the locative where you're really indicating where something is. All right. Next one, number 8, is known as a concessive clause. And if you think like it sounds like a concession stand is supposed to make you happy. That's why we call it concession, concessive. And concessives are although, though, even if, even though, while, and whereas. Right. Go. Essentially, concessives are supposed to pretty much concede a point, right? Here's a good example. Although you did not study for this test, you still passed. Okay, so you're conceding 1 point for the first. The idea is you still passed. Okay, but the concession is you didn't study, right? Which is bad, but by throwing although in there, I'm dismissing the idea that it was bad. Okay, so right there is my dependent, and right here is my independent. And last but not least, at number 9, purpose clause. So in other words, what is the purpose of you doing something? And it's usually introduced by so that, lest, kind of like in lest we forget, and in order that. And an example would be in order that I may be great at grammar, I must watch Mr. G's videos. And that's it. Once again, in order that I may be great at grammar is my dependent clause, and I must watch Mr. G's videos, and here is my independent clause. Sorry about that, little freeze here. All right. And that's it. Those are all the clauses in a nutshell. And again, we're going to go over the most difficult one next video. This is the conditional, because conditionals have a lot of different categories and a lot of different ways of expressing the if clause and the result clause. Otherwise, please keep watching this video, practice these clauses one by one. When you're reading, see if you can find or identify a clause, and just try every single day to review little by little to become really good at expressing your ideas clearly. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.